tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and of having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversation?
In Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, published in 1865, the protagonist's adventure begins when she becomes bored by the book her sister is reading. Alice's desire for a book with pictures demonstrates a link between childhood and visual culture. The association of childhood reading with pictures grew even stronger in the 20th century. Now picture books are thought of as the books we read aloud to children who don't know how to read yet, and then as the first books children read on their own. Yet as Barbara Bader, author of American picture books from Noah's Ark to The Beast Within, draws attention to the many elements of a picture book, saying a picture book is a text, illustration, total design, an item of manufacture in a commercial product, a social, cultural, historical document, and foremost, an experience for a child. At their most basic, picture books are books for young children that combine words with illustrations to tell a story. They are meant to be read aloud while the child views the illustration. Thus, picture books presents a special challenge to critics because these books require an evaluation of the art, the text, and how the two go together to create a unique art form. Picture books as we know them today are fairly recent inventions. Children's books that combine short text and illustration to tell a story were developed by European artists and printers such as Randolph Caldecott in the mid-20th century. However, it wasn't until 1928 that the modern American picture book was born with the publication of Wanda Gagg's Millions of Cats. While earlier efforts sought story and picture side by side, Gagg was the first one to take the art beyond the conventional illustrations. Her pictures helped to tell the story by using the negative space to indicate the passage of time. She varied page layouts, and some illustrations broke out of their own frames to extend across 2 pages. The innovation were immediately imitated and refined by other artists creating books for young children, and soon they were considered the conventions of the art themselves. In 1938, 10 years after the publication of Millions of Cats, the Caldecott Medal was established to recognize excellence in picture book art. The decade that followed are often thought of as the golden age of the American picture books, as this new art form attracted the talents of many gifted artists working in a variety of styles that have flourished in the 20th century art scene. During the years of the Golden Age, books with color illustrations often required artists to go through the painstaking process of separating colors by hand for offset printing. An artist was allowed to work with 1, 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 color choices, depending on the publisher's budget. The more colors, the more expensive it was to print. In a 3-color art, for instance, an artist might choose to use black, blue, and yellow, and then would separate the art by preparing the portions of the pictures that were all black, then painting on a separate sheet called overlays the portions that were blue, and then the portions that were yellow on yet another one, so that the finished art would actually be 3 sheets layered one on top of each other. They even did it to get the green layering the yellow and the blue in just a specific way. Changes in technology in the mid-1980s, however, had an enormous impact on book production, especially in the area of picture books. Advances such as high-speed presses, computer technology, and scanning devices not only allowed for accurate reproduction of full-color art, but also accomplished in lowering the prices. These changes encouraged the entry of many new fine artists into the field who employed a great variety of techniques and styles. In the midst of the ever-changing world of picture books, perhaps the factor that remains most consistent is the children themselves. Young children may enjoy being dazzled by the latest bold venture in picture book art, but at the same time, they may ask to return again and again and again and again to the familiar comforts of Goodnight Moon. Just what is it about this picture book that has ensured its success for more than 60 years? It scores high marks in all areas that matter when it comes to picture books: outstanding text, excellent illustrations, and successful integration of the two. But a children's chance at experiencing any picture book as a whole is completely dependent on someone who is willing and able to read the text aloud. Let's take a closer look at the text of a picture book to find out what makes it work. Anyone who has ever read picture books aloud to children knows just how important the words are. Since most picture books are 32 pages in length, and since most of those pages are covered with illustrations, their text is necessarily short. There's another reason for the economical use of words. Preschoolers simply have limits to what they can and will take in. Lengthy description and sophisticated abstractions are unnecessarily and pointless. In picture books, as in poetry, every word counts. But beyond telling a compelling story in a few words, a good picture book text has a distinctive structure based on familiar patterns. In order to evaluate picture books, we must ask ourselves, what is the story about? But also, how is the story told? And when it comes to studying the structural elements of a successful picture book text, we can find no better model than the laureate of the nursery, Margaret Wise Brown. Not long after Wanda Gag launched American Picture Books with publications of Million Cats, writer Margaret Wise Brown entered the scene. As a teacher of 2 to 5-year-olds in the Bank Street Experimental School during the 1930s, Brown was a keen observer of the developmental behavior of her young students. She was also greatly influenced by the groundbreaking work of her mentor, Lucy Sprague Mitchell, who asserted that when it came to words, rhythm and sound quality were more important to young children than meaning. It was during this time that Margaret Wise Brown began to write her picture books. Rhythm and sound are the hallmarks of Brown's picture books. She accomplished this by building a pattern of words that is rooted in a young child's experience and understanding of the world. In Brown's noisy books, for example, routine in the everyday world was made extraordinary as children were asked to consider them from the perspective of a little dog named Muffin, who experienced the world by hearing it. All of the elements of pattern language that contribute to the success of picture book text for young children can be found in the passage shown from the noisy book. There are rhythm, rhyme, repetition, and questions. Let's start with rhythm. Note the variation in the line length, which, as in poetry, gives the reader clues as to how to read the words. He heard tick-tock, tick-tock. It was the clock. He heard it was the radiator. But even if the lines are written as paragraphs, they would still maintain most of the rhythm due to Brown's choice of words. She is using the technique of ammananathea. This means that the naming of things or the actions by a vocal imitation of the sound associated with it. Think about the s, or the snip, snap, the tingling, the grr of your stomach, or the buzz of a fly. Because young children are often inexperienced listeners, their attention wanders easily. Brown places these sort of rhythmic hooks at a regular interval to draw them back. Let's talk about rhyme. While rhyme in the noisy book isn't necessarily obvious, as it is with many other picture books, it is in fact there in a pleasing repetition of sound and sentences that appear throughout the story. In addition to make the story easier to listen to, The rhymes also enhance the predictability of the story. When young children listen to a rhyming story, they can generally supply the last word in a couplet or a quatrain, provided the subject is within the realm of their experience. So he heard ting-a-ling. That would have been a common telephone sound at the time that the book was originally written. He heard the grr, grr, and knew that it was his stomach growling. Or he heard the buzz, buzz, and he knew that that was the little black fly. Let's talk about repetition. And again, I think we've already repeated this a couple of times, but Brown skillfully alternates repeated lines with the introduction of words or concepts that are new to children. The familiar, expected pattern makes children feel comfortable and ready to face the unfamiliar and the unexpected. And then we have questions. The question and answer mode is a language pattern very familiar to young children. The noisy books are filled with questions that inspire children to think about what sounds Muffin is hearing and the source of the various sounds he hears. In the concept of picture books, questions serve a couple of different purposes. Since questions are generally read with a different intonation, they add variety of the sound and the rhythm of the text. They can also serve as hooks that will pull in a wandering mind and keep the audience's attention focused. In addition, they directly involve the child in the story, something that makes the story more interesting for everyone, but also enhances the self-concept of the child. With young children, there is no such thing as a rhetorical question. If the text asks a question, you're going to get an answer. The answers to some of the questions might be obvious, but others require creative thinking. And lastly, those questions help the adult reader assess the level of understanding and appreciation on the part of the child audience. So let's think about those items with another book, Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. Does it have a pattern? Oh God, yes. Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. Right there, just those couple of words, we've got a pattern going. Does it have a rhyme? Does it have repetition? Does it ask questions? Why the first 2 pages of the book? A told B and B told C, I'll meet you at the top of the coconut tree. We said D to E, F, G. I'll beat you to the top of the coconut tree. Chicka chicka boom boom, will there be enough room? We're asking a question. Here comes H up the coconut tree. The pleasing sound of pattern language is especially effective in picture books aimed for the preschool crowd. It functions almost like a net to catch and hold the reader's attention or the listener's attention. The most successful use of pattern language reveals themselves when the text is read out loud. As children gain experience listening to stories, they begin to develop an understanding that stories follow a regular sequence. This idea can be reinforced by the repeated reading of the same story, often at the child's request, as children become so familiar with the book that they can easily predict what will come next. Sometimes writers of picture books build predictability into the text with repeated actions or phrases, or the use of the same sentence structure over and over. And then you have pace. While pattern language and predictability are essentially important in picture books, pace is also an important feature. The best writing we find of picture books text takes advantage of a unique art form by acknowledging what is called the drama of the turning page. Sounds like a soap opera. Think about the monster at the end of the book. The whole point is what? Getting to the end of the book, obviously, but not getting to the monster. So back in Canvas, I actually have a copy of the monster at the end of the book. It's a YouTube video for you to watch.